Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Peter Alexander here in Washington, where the government shutdown is about to enter its fourth week with no end in sight, no apparent desire for compromise on either side of the aisle. Today, the president, alongside Republican senators, presented what was in effect a united front as President Trump hosted those GOP lawmakers on the newly renovated White House Rose Garden patio.
Unfortunately, in a craven and pointless act of partisan spite, Chuck Schumer, who I've known for a long time, and the radical left Democrats are holding the entire federal government hostage to appease the extremists in their party. They are the obstructionists, and the reason they're doing it is because we're doing so well.
This is the fourth week of the Democrat shutdown, but we are all here today because your Republican team in the Senate is unified. And we are going to keep voting to open up the government, and eventually the Democrats, hopefully sooner or later, are going to come around. But, Mr. President, your agenda is the right one for this country. This is your team. We are your partners.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune there. It comes a day after the top Democrat in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, accused congressional Republicans of being beholden to the president.
We know that House and Senate Republicans don't do anything without getting permission from their boss, Donald J. Trump. And the reason why there have been no negotiations, zero negotiations, since Republicans shut the government down, is because Donald Trump clearly wants the government shut down. He wants to inflict pain on the American people. And this will not change until Donald Trump gives Republicans permission to sit down with Democrats.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, the Senate failed to pass the same government funding bill for the 11th time in these 21 days. It remains unclear what, if anything, will force lawmakers to the negotiating table. Just pull back the curtain. Think about past shutdowns, the urgency of military troops going without pay for an extended period of time, or maybe flight disruptions because of TSA and air traffic controller staffing shortages. Those would fuel the need for talks. But the president last week signed an order to pay troops by shuffling around Department of Defense funds. And Politico is now reporting the administration is looking for ways to pay air traffic controllers now as well. There are still some potential tipping points that loom. One is at the end of the month. It's the potential lapse in the Women, Infant, and Children Nutrition Assistance Program. They call it WIC. The White House has said it would transfer resources from tariff revenue to help bolster WIC, that program, though they didn't provide any details how and when that could happen. Then there's November 1st. Circle that date on your calendar. That's when states are warning about disruptions to SNAP benefits, what we used to call food stamps, if the shutdown does not end. Also on November 1st, open enrollment for the Affordable Care Act, which has been at the center of Democrats' demands on health care. And then just 2 weeks from today, another significant date, the Election Day, when voters will get to send a message to Washington, specifically in two key governor's races in Virginia and in New Jersey. Joining me now on Capitol Hill, NBC's Mel Zanona. Monica Alba, my colleague at the White House, is there looking out over the building as we speak. Mel, let's start with you if we can. We highlighted some of the potential inflection points. What are lawmakers watching for right now? Is this going to come down to which states feel the shutdown pain most acutely?
Yeah, ultimately, Peter, the shutdown could end based on who is feeling the pain the most, and it could hit different states and different parties very differently. There are a number of pain points coming up, as you outlined. We're looking at everything from this upcoming Friday, when federal workers are going to miss their first full paycheck of the shutdown, to all the way to Thanksgiving. Hopefully, we're still not in a shutdown by then, but there is a concern about travel delays if the shutdown is still ongoing at that point. But the date that I'm watching most closely is really that November 1st Affordable Care Act open enrollment date, because Democrats have been fighting to extend the expiring Obamacare subsidies prior to that date. Once we go past it, the question is, are Democrats still going to insist on keeping the government closed until they get a vote on extending those subsidies? Will they feel it's already too late and they're just going to make Republicans essentially own the skyrocketing premiums that are about to happen if Congress does not step in? So potentially this could be an off-ramp for the shutdown. But so far, Democrats saying they are holding firm. They still want to negotiate. Even today, Chuck Schumer, the Senate minority leader, saying he and Hakeem Jeffries actually reached out to Trump to schedule a meeting. They have not met since the shutdown began. So potentially, maybe there's some movement there, but so far, no signs of budging on Capitol Hill.
Mel, it's interesting when we talk about Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. In different states, this sometimes goes by different names. In Kentucky, they call it Connect, in effect, right? So some Americans don't even realize that this affects them, but it may be the way that they're getting their health care right now. I want to talk to you about this sort of effort that we saw by the president, John Thune, as we showed just a moment ago, trying to show this sort of unified front, right? A key Republican was missing from today's event. He's voted against this CR, this continuing resolution. What do we know about Senator Rand Paul?
Yeah, I actually just caught up with him on my way over to do this TV hit with you, Peter. He had put out a tweet, actually, during the lunch at the White House with another Kentucky rabble-rousing Republican, Thomas Massie, who's been a thorn in Trump's side. They said they had their own lunch today. And so I asked him why he chose to reveal that information. Was he trying to hit back at the White House? Was he trying to troll Trump? And he said he wanted to make clear that he was not the one being, in his words, petulant. It was that the White House was the one who didn't invite him. And he even suggested that perhaps he would have attended the lunch had he been invited. But no doubt Rand Paul has been also a thorn in the side of Trump. He has been one of the only Republican, I should say, voting against the bill to reopen the government. He has spoken out against a number of other policy issues close to Donald Trump and the administration. So not a surprise that Trump decided to not invite him and call him out during that lunch.
Mel, don't want to get too in the weeds here, right? But we heard from the Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. He's one of the Democrats who have consistently voted for that Republican stopgap funding bill. He said that he would support killing to get around this 60-vote threshold to reopen the government. Is that an idea that flies with many of these senators here? Is that an option that could be explored?
And at this point, no. This is something that is not desired by either party, Republicans or Democrats. And Republicans are really trying to play the long game here. And they said we could nuke the filibuster now, but what happens then when Democrats control the Senate at some point in the future? Then they're going to be able to pass bills on a simple majority threshold. So at this point, that guardrail is going to remain. But we'll see if that calculus changes as the pressure builds and if the shutdown continues to drag on, Peter.
Mel Zanona, we appreciate it for your reporting at the Hill for us right now. I want to get to Monica Alba, the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue right now. Mon, let's walk through this a little bit. First, let's start with the optics, if we can, for a second. This shutdown just broadly feels different than past shutdowns. For one, you got the president hosting a cheeseburger, fries, and iced tea lunch on the new Rose Garden patio. There, the president at the same time is talking about his desire to get rid of these Democratic programs. He's going to be firing individuals as well. Pull back the curtain on the way the White House sort of views this and how it's different than ones before.
Yeah, this is really business as usual, Peter. If you're at the White House like we are day to day, you wouldn't even necessarily know that there is a government shutdown going on, because certainly the president is not conducting himself in a manner that would imply that. He is continuing to hold many events, sometimes multiple per day. He's continuing to travel. He just went down to Florida to his Mar-a-Lago estate this past weekend. He, of course, has also been even traveling overseas. He went to the Middle East in the last couple of weeks, and he's going to be heading to Asia, to multiple countries, to attend some world summits at the end of this week. So we know that he is continuing with his agenda. He's continuing to make announcements related to policy, and he's continuing to do all of this as we know the fate of many and thousands of federal workers continue to hang in the balance. And as Mel just reported there, maybe there are some questions, some potential for future meetings or negotiations, but that certainly hasn't really been the posture at the White House. They have been very firm in their position, and they continue to be pretty dug in on it, with the president saying today that he appreciates how loyal Republicans have been for holding the line, for sticking together, and for essentially daring Democrats to be the ones to potentially blink first in this shutdown, Peter.
And one of the challenges, obviously, Monica, this go around, right, is that the White House is shuffling funds. There are questions about whether they can do this, but they're shuffling funds to help try to pay for some of those individuals, troops, and perhaps air traffic controllers that could be impacted. Is there any potential that backfires? Is that going to hold?
Well, listen, the president has said that it was a priority from the beginning to ensure that any active duty troops, so we're talking about all of these National Guard men and women, remember, some of whom that have been deployed already to cities, some of whom could be heading to Portland, Oregon soon, depending on what happens there with that court case. And really, you have a lot of other members of the military who now are going to be paid. They are able to do that by basically moving around some funds that were allocated for research purposes within the Department of Defense budget that already had been taken care of. They believe they will be able to do that without any real kind of opposition. But the president has also directed some federal law enforcement agents, so people who work for ICE, people who work for CBP, also to be paid. And there are questions, of course, about those air traffic controllers and TSA agents. So far, they have not been paid yet. Peter.
Gorgeous fall day here in the nation's capital. Monica, we appreciate your reporting. We do want to turn now to another pressing issue on President Trump's agenda. That is his desire to end the war in Ukraine. We have some new reporting right now that President Trump's upcoming scheduled summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin appears to be further away than the White House claims. Had certainly hoped. A senior White House official tells NBC News that the in-person talks in Budapest, Hungary, are now, in their words, on hold. According to that official, the president changed his mind after being briefed on what was described as a productive call between Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, with the president now believing neither Russia nor Ukraine's leaders are ready for serious peace talks. And joining me now is Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, we've heard the president say, this is going to happen in a couple of weeks on a lot of different things. Just a couple of days ago, he said the meeting is going to happen in a couple of weeks with Vladimir Putin. We know he got very little to show for the first visit. I was there in Alaska. What do you make of this headline now that they are backing away from the idea that there will be face-to-face talks?
They are in an impasse, and the president has been in different places in the last couple of days, to put it kindly. First, they were going to meet within 2 weeks, he said. He said that they should just declare the current battle lines, stop the fighting, have a ceasefire now. He also declared that he thought that Vladimir Putin was ready for peace talks. Vladimir Putin is not ready for peace talks because he, after a Thursday call last week with the president, certainly believes that he can get more. He believes now that anytime he talks to President Trump, he persuades President Trump to come further over to his position and further away from Zelensky's position.
The best first example, of course, was when we arrived in Alaska. The president said, I want a ceasefire. If we don't get one, I'll be disappointed. He left that room saying, I think we need to have a peace deal, which is exactly what Putin wanted, right? Because it freezes the war, as it were, and gives him the territory that he wants right now. A lot of this comes on the backs of this call between Lavrov and his counterparts, Marco Rubio. Do we have any better insight about what went on in this call?
I think they agreed to disagree and agreed that they are not any closer to an agreement. I think that President Trump, understandably, after the success, and it's an extraordinary success with the ceasefire in Gaza, felt that he could now do the rest of the job, which is finish another war. Finish the war in Ukraine. Well, it's a lot more complicated in a strange way than the Middle East was, because Vladimir Putin is just not ready to make any concessions, and because the president has not been willing to put pressure on Putin the way he put pressure on Netanyahu and pressure on Hamas. And by putting pressure on his ally, Netanyahu, whom he had embraced and given a green light to go to Gaza City, to take really strong measures, didn't argue against putting a hold on aid for 4 months to the Palestinians in Gaza, to the Gazans, to squeeze Hamas and put more pressure on Hamas. At that point, Netanyahu felt he had free rein and made the, I think, critical mistake of attacking Qatar. And that infuriated the president. He then put pressure on Netanyahu. Well, he is not willing to do that. He has not put sanctions on Putin.
Well, the Tomahawks, as you were going to raise here, right? The Tomahawks is the one thing, these long-range missiles that could target some missile and drone sites deep inside Russia. The president has floated the idea, has talked about it openly, but doesn't seem willing to move on that idea. And
now, and his most recent position is that Zelensky should give up territory to Putin that Putin did not get on the ground, the critical area of the Donbass. So the military, Putin has not been accomplished something militarily that he could accomplish diplomatically by his ally, President Trump. And it's an extraordinary position for Zelensky to be put in. And so far, the Europeans are put back by this, but now it is spurring them to consider taking $160+ billion in frozen Russian assets and helping Zelensky, because he's not gotten any weapons from the U.S. since Donald Trump was elected.
Andrew, we appreciate it. Thanks for your expertise, as always.
You bet.
Coming up, The View from a a House Democrat whose district is packed with federal workers as the government shutdown hits its 3-week mark. No end in sight. Plus, It is the final countdown to election night 2025. The action on the campaign trail is heating up. Former President Barack Obama and a slew of potential 2028 contenders now hitting the road in some of the biggest states. Steve Kornacki is at the big board breaking it all down. That's straight ahead. You're watching Meet the Press Now live. Welcome back to Meet the Press Now. As we mentioned earlier, Election Day, just 2 weeks from today, could be a critical inflection point in the ongoing shutdown fight as voters make their voices heard about the issues that matter most to them, including in Virginia, which is holding statewide elections. It's also, of course, really at the center of the shutdown. Nearly 150,000 civilian federal workers live in the Commonwealth. And joining me now is Virginia Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw, who has a district right there with an estimated 52,000 federal employees. That's approximately 12% of its workforce. I think you have the fifth most federal employees of any district in the country. So this is certainly personal to so many of your constituents. Congressman, I appreciate your being here. I want to ask you out of the gates right now about the effect that this shutdown is having on the people that live in your community, those federal workers. What is your message to those workers who are either being furloughed and in many cases fear they could be fired as a function of this?
So the federal workers I represent and those in Virginia and across the country have lived through 9 months of a constant barrage of attacks from the Trump administration. Many have been fired.
I'm interrupting you briefly because your mic isn't working for us properly, and we got it again. So I want to ask you that question again so the audience gets to hear what you just told me. What are you saying to your constituents?
I am saying that I'm here in Washington, ready, as all Democrats are, to negotiate a compromise that reopens the government and addresses the health care crisis that we're facing and hopefully secures some protections for federal workers moving forward who have faced an all-out assault from the Trump administration over the last 9 months.
So let's be clear about this. You're open to a compromise. That's basically what the Democrats view is the compromises you view at health care and reopening the government. Republicans say reopen the government, then we'll talk about the health care issue, the premiums going up for so many Americans.
Yeah.
Why not do one, then the other?
I wish I could trust my Republican colleagues and their stated commitments to address the health care issues, but this is a group of folks who have spent 15 years trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, who just passed a so-called big, beautiful bill that slashes Medicaid, rips health care from working families. So I don't trust them when they say they're committed to addressing the skyrocketing premiums that Americans are about to experience.
Is there a risk that you, as a Democrat in a state like Virginia and the district that you're in right now, are between a rock and a hard place, which is to say, on the one end, your constituents are potentially losing their jobs and not getting paid right now. In many places, people are relying on the benefits and the generosity of neighbors in their communities to get food on the table. And on the other hand, you want to get these premiums. The bottom line is they're getting hurt either way. Is there some other solution that you can propose, which is get them back to work and then deal? Is it just all a function of trust?
Well, I've talked to hundreds of federal workers before and during the shutdown, and almost to a person, they want to see us standing up to the Trump administration because you mentioned federal workers losing their jobs. That's what's been happening for the last 9 months. So they've been under attack by the Trump administration. The federal job cuts would continue with or without the shutdown, and I'm hopeful to secure some protections against those in the compromise that ultimately has to happen here.
So where do you get protections to deal with a president who just yesterday said he pledged to cut Democrat programs that he doesn't like? He said they've given us this opportunity right now. What is the recourse? What can you do? You're a majority party right now to push back on the president.
Well, one, we can point out that the programs he's cutting are not Democrat programs, and it's not punishing me. He's punishing the American people who benefit from these programs that, yes, my constituents as federal workers help to deliver. I'd like to see a commitment and an end to the rescissions where the Republicans essentially renege on spending deals.
Is there any mechanism to do that?
Well, the Democratic bill that Democrats have put forward in both the House and Senate would do that. And this is the challenge we're in, right? The Democratic bill, I concede, doesn't have 60 votes in the Senate, nor does the Republican bill. So I think most Americans out there understand, in their families and businesses, if you have two competing proposals and neither get enough support, you come together, sit down, and compromise.
So do you have any sense right now, there's a real sense this could go on for a while? It's already the longest full government shutdown we've ever had. We're day 21, 22, depending how you do your count right now. Are you having any conversations that give you a sense of the timetable for this? Is there any reason for optimism in this conversation?
Well, one, I think President Trump likes to break break records, and he already holds the record for the longest shutdown in history in his first term. I fear that he wants to break a record.
That's not a reason for optimism.
No, it's not. I fear that he wants this to be even longer. But a reason for optimism is there's reporting today that Republicans internally are getting nervous about the ACA premium increases that are going to start hitting Americans on November 1st when they try to log in to healthcare.gov and look at their healthcare coverage for the next year. They're starting to talk about what a package could look like. So I think they're starting to feel the pressure from their constituents on this healthcare crisis.
Obviously, Democrats are in the minority. The president won. He won all 7 swing states, didn't win the state of Virginia, of course. But do Democrats need to make some concessions in this, given where the country is, at least in its most recent national election?
I think the answer is yes. In a negotiation, everyone has to compromise. And the bill that Democrats put forward in both the House and Senate has a long list of Democratic priorities.
What's one key place that the Democrats, we being you, are willing to compromise?
Well, look, we have laid out a plan to cancel the cuts to Medicaid, the $1 trillion cuts to Medicaid. I think what we've said from Democrats is, look, we're going to prioritize the ACA premium credits, which is the most urgent crisis, and we're willing to continue the fight on the Medicaid cuts into the next year. So that's a compromise right there. We got 1,000 things we'd like the Trump administration to do differently. Our proposal puts forward a handful of things that are urgent and the American people need to be dealt with right now.
Let me ask you about one of the key issues that's on the plate for a lot of voters in your state right now, the election being held just 2 weeks away. This is specifically about the controversy that surrounds the Virginia Attorney General candidate. This is a man by the name of Jay Jones. There were some texts that were recently unearthed where he said some violent, vitriolic things about then Virginia House Speaker, a Republican named Todd Gilbert, said he should be shot at the time. In her debate, Abigail Spanberger, who, of course, is running for governor as a Democrat in the state, condemned his comments but stopped short of calling him to drop out. Do you believe that Jay Jones should drop out because of the language he used?
No, I don't. Ballots have already been cast. The election started weeks ago. I think the comments he made in that private text exchange were abhorrent. For me, I'm always looking, can folks apologize, acknowledge the harm that they've done, and grow as people and as leaders? I think he's on that path, and the voters will make a determination on November 4th.
Is it harder to condemn Republicans who may say things that are vitriolic and hate-filled if you're condemning it but not telling him that he should step aside?
No, I don't think it is. I think there's a distinction between a private text exchange years ago and what we've seen. We just saw this week Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries faced a death threat, and thankfully law enforcement apprehended that individual. That individual was pardoned by Donald J. Trump after he participated in the violent insurrection at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. That's real violence.
Congressman, how much do the Democrats need to win to send a message to President Trump in the state of Virginia?
Well, Virginia is a narrowly divided state. Virginia is not a state where anybody's going to win by 10-plus points. So, I think we're on track. Abigail Spanberger is a very strong candidate to be in the high single digits on November 4th, but we're not taking anything for granted.
We'll watch. Congressman, nice to see you. Appreciate you making time to speak to us right here. Up next, Democrats criticize a Republican-led redistricting effort in the state of North Carolina as that state's Senate approves a new map designed to help Republicans in next year's midterms. We are live in Raleigh with the latest on what is happening inside and outside the Capitol there. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. 2 weeks to Election Day, and Democrats are counting on one of the most prominent figures to lead them to victory in 2 of the biggest races. Former President Obama will hit the campaign trail in both New Jersey and in Virginia just 3 days before Election Day. It comes after the former president endorsed Mikey Sherrill in her bid for governor of New Jersey and Abigail Spanberger to be the governor in Virginia. Meanwhile, in the race for New York City's next mayor, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries appears poised to finally make a decision about endorsing Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani, who won the nomination on the Democratic side in July. Jeffries tells reporters that he intends on making his thoughts clear on the race after dodging questions on the matter for weeks. NBC News national political correspondent, of course, is Steve Kornacki, and he's joining us now. Steve, I'm glad you're here for this conversation. Mamdani is a self-described Democratic socialist. How does he fit into how New Yorkers and Americans feel about this idea of socialism?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Peter. I think we kind of look at New York City and we say, well, politically, culturally, New York City is kind of different than America as a whole. But how about New York City and the National Democratic Party is what's happening in this mayoral election, where the Democratic candidate, Zohran Mamdani, continues to lead in the polls, benefits from divided opposition, unpopular opponents, where he continues to be the favorite to win here. Does that say anything more broadly than New York City about the Democratic Party nationally and its attitudes towards socialism, which we used to, not that long ago think would be politically the kiss of death to be associated with? Well, take a look here at some numbers from Gallup, because Gallup has been testing this for years, for decades, really. Basic attitudes towards socialism and capitalism. These are the latest numbers that they came up with. Overall, asking folks, do you have a positive view of socialism? 39% of Americans said yes. 54% said they had a positive view of capitalism. But look at the party split here among Democrats. Look at socialism. That's nationally again. 2/3 of Democrats nationally, not talking New York City, but across the country, say to Gallup they have a favorable, positive view of socialism. Only 42% of capitalism. And take a look here. Independents, Republicans, it is different. Slight majority of independents favorable toward capitalism. 3/4 of Republicans favorable towards capitalism. Well under 50% in each case favorable to socialism. Now, this trend among Democrats nationally also, it's not new. This has been building for some time here. Again, from these Gallup numbers, take a look at this. Start on capitalism. Go back to 2010 here. Democrats were basically split then, 15 years ago. Positive, negative on capitalism. And look at that number. It kind of stayed steady. And then in the last 5 years, it's fallen down to 42%, barely over 40%. And in that same time, take a look at what's happened with socialism. Again, Democratic Party attitudes here. 2010, it was 50-50. It's ticked up. And now in the last couple of readouts, 2/3 of Democrats saying they have a positive image of socialism. So if Mamdani is successful, Peter, in New York City, I think one of the things you might say is it's not a revelation necessarily that socialism, that his brand of socialism might be palatable to some Democrats. It might just be further confirmation of what polling has actually been telling us for some time now, not just in New York.
Yeah, that much more striking, though, of course, New York being, in effect, the epicenter of capitalism in our country, and could have someone like Zohran Mamdani running the city before we know it. Steve Kornacki, always good to have you. Thanks for your expertise here. And turning from next month's elections to the fight over future elections in North Carolina, becoming the latest target of Republicans' redistricting efforts. Just moments ago, a key committee in the state house there voted to approve a new map that could give Republicans an extra seat in next midterms. It still has to get a vote in the full House, but earlier in the day it was approved by the state Senate. Republicans control both the Senate and the House in North Carolina. The state does have a Democratic governor, but he does not have veto power over what would be a new map. The redistricting plan sparked protests today in Raleigh, the state capital.
This is just what my sign says. Cheaters. They're cheaters. You can't win unless you cheat. And it's just not right.
I dare them to do it, because every time they do something like this, it brings more and more people out to realize what is happening in the state and in this country. Go for it, because the people are ready. Gerrymandering only works if we do not get educated, and we do not get informed, we do not work together.
It makes me sad because, like I said, I didn't think that this was in the past. I thought all this had gotten settled and none of this would surface again, but apparently I was wrong.
This is not a new conversation. Of course, we've watched it in Texas and California, now in North Carolina, and that's where NBC News national correspondent Aaron Gilchrist joins us from Raleigh. Aaron, what is the status of the efforts to redraw North Carolina's congressional map? I know there's a lot of moving parts this afternoon.
Yeah, you walked through some of it a second ago there, Peter. This is a map that is going to become the map that is used here in North Carolina when it comes to congressional districts, because, as you noted, the Republicans control both chambers of the General Assembly here, and the measure is now working its way through the process in the House, where it is expected to pass ultimately as well. As you noted, the governor has no authority to veto it. He is a Democrat, but this is redistricting maps are not something that he has any power over. And so, despite the protests that we've heard from from Democratic lawmakers here in North Carolina and from all the people who gathered at that rally, people who spoke during the public hearing portion of a public comment portion of the hearings that we've seen here in North Carolina over the last couple of days, people who've spoken passionately against redistricting, calling it cheating, saying that this is racial or racist gerrymandering in so many instances. And so the idea that this state would now have 11 Republican congressional districts instead of 10, as it currently does, is something that doesn't sit well with a lot of voters, Peter. This is something that could end up in the courts. It's also worth noting, though, that the Supreme Court here in North Carolina is conservative, just like the U.S. Supreme Court, Peter.
Aaron, I want to get to sort of the root of this, right? Like in a lot of states, the governor, the president, would have some sort of a veto power here. Not the case for North Carolina's Democratic governor. He has no power to stop this redistricting effort. So in real terms, what is the mechanism? What is the strategy the Democrats are leaning on right now?
Yeah, I asked that question of one of the state senators I spoke with earlier today here, and he said the strategy is partly to keep talking about this, to keep voters engaged on this issue. I want you to hear a little bit more of what the senator said to me earlier today.
Is an arrow in our quiver, because the people of North Carolina, I have heard from Republicans, I've heard from Democrats, I've heard from independents. They are fed up and they are outraged over what they see happening here today. And it's so brazen. I mean, they're doing it in the open. And some of my Republican colleagues have said to me last night, they said, wow, we really gave you a gift for the 2026 midterms. And this is going to fire people up.
And so that's part of the thinking here, to fire people up so that more Democrats can be elected in the state legislature here, to the state Supreme Court as well. Peter, Democrats believe that even though they will likely lose this fight on this particular issue this go round, they think it's something that they can campaign on and potentially win on in future elections, particularly in the midterms next year, Peter.
Aaron Gilchrist there in Raleigh, North Carolina for us today. Aaron, appreciate it very much. And still to come right here. He came in like a wrecking ball inside President Trump's White House makeover as construction and demolition begins. We have that story and a lot more news and politics to get to. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune is urging the White House to pull its nominee to lead a key whistleblower agency. Several Senate Republicans say they will not vote to confirm this man, Paul Ingrassia, the president's pick to lead the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, over his history of inflammatory comments. Among them, calls for January 6th to be declared a national holiday and questioning the legitimacy of Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. Politico also reports that Ingrassia once said he had a, quote, Nazi streak in a text chat and said that Martin Luther King Jr. Day should be tossed into the seventh circle of hell. In a statement, Ingrassia's attorneys suggest the text messages could be AI generated or not real, while adding that they were self-deprecating and satirical humor, and that Ingrassia is the furthest thing from a Nazi. So they may be AI, but if they weren't, they were self-deprecating. I'm joined now by Dan Merica, co-anchor of the Washington Post Early Brief newsletter, Megan Hayes, former special assistant to President Biden, and Danielle Pletka, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and an NBC News contributor. Dan, we were trying to pull back the curtain, and go back 9 months here. This is sort of the most significant pushback you've seen from Republican lawmakers on a Trump pick since, what, Matt Gaetz? There are almost no other examples you can think of. Do you think the White House pulls this knob?
It seems like they're going to have to, or he's just going to not win this vote. I mean, you're completely right, and it's not coming from the senators that it normally comes from. You've seen the Susan Collinses of the world, the Lisa Murkowskis of the world say no to the White House. You haven't really seen John Thune, Ron Johnson, Rick Scott, a few others who have raised some concerns about this nominee. That's really telling, and it is also telling that it's taken this long. We're months into the second Trump term, that it's taken this long for this to happen. It does speak to what these text messages say, and it's also interesting that the defense is that they may be AI generated, but they were also a joke, I guess. I don't know how they can be both made up and also a joke, but that it is telling that this is the line. That this is the line that they have found.
Megan, if the president pushes on this, do the senators follow suit?
No, and I don't think the president will push on this. I mean, what does he get from doing this? And on the heels of last week's text messages that were also very racist, they don't get anything from doing this. And it's just showing who the Republican Party is to the rest of the country. And I think that's detrimental for not only Trump, but also for some of these senators and House members who are running for re-election.
Is this finally a line that some Republican senators will not cross?
I hope so. I mean, just for starters, we've just discovered that a candidate for office, a Democratic candidate for office in Maine, has what he describes as a Totenkopf, so from the SS, tattoo on his body, which brings up a whole question about how many people have Nazi tattoos and what party they belong to. But if the Republicans are going to stand against him, then they really kind of need to stand against Ingrassia because, you know, it's kind of disgusting.
Well, we obviously were talking about that recent chat that we saw from young Republicans contained racist and anti-Semitic content, right? While many denounced those, you got Vice President Vance who said this was just kids.
Yes.
Is it okay? Where are we as a sort of political conversation that we can allow that and say it's just kids?
So what I don't get is when you, forgive me for digressing a little bit, but when you try to immigrate into this country or you try to enter the country, they ask to see your cell phone and they want to look and see if you're supporting Hamas or if you're supporting some neo-Nazi lunatic or a terrorist group or narco-terrorist. But when you're a candidate for office or a nominee before the United States Senate, that all is just kind of cute stuff that we really don't care about. Americans are allowed to be like this. It's only foreigners who can't be scummy.
Also, they're not exactly kids.
Yeah,
I mean, they may represent organizations that are young Republicans or young,
right. But they're not
that young.
Yes.
You know, they're not kids.
Right, just like the people at universities who are anti-Semites. We can't call those people kids. We don't excuse them for being kids because they hate Jews.
I think we agree across the board. There should be a consequence for all of them.
Exactly.
Understood. Let me ask you, Megan, about some other news we're watching. This is a man who was pardoned by President Trump after storming the Capitol on January 6th, right? He was just charged with threatening the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries. My colleague, Ryan Noble, spoke to Speaker Johnson about it today. Here's part of that conversation. Listen.
Did President Trump make a mistake by just offering up a blanket pardon for every single person that was convicted as a result?
I don't know. And I will say that anybody who threatens political violence against elected officials or anyone else should be have the full weight and measure of the Department of Justice on their head. I will tell you this. The violence on the left is far more prevalent than the violence on the right. Don't make me go through the list. You all know it. All of these the assassination culture that's been advanced now, this is the left in almost every case that is advancing this and not the right. So let's not make it a partisan issue.
Your reaction to that?
I mean, are we surprised that this person who is in January 6th committing an insurrection is now committing more crimes? He's the first of hundreds of them that have already been convicted or charged with other crimes. But also, it's interesting that a man of faith can get up there and lie so diligently and say it's just on one side that there is political violence. It is not just one side, and it is disgusting that he does that in front of the entire country.
Well, I think a frustration for those who cover this, and we're advocates for the facts, not for Republicans or Democrats, of course, is after what happened in Minnesota, right? You want the President of the United States to also condemn that, where a Democratic lawmaker and her husband were among those who were targeted here. But let me ask you about this, Danielle, if I can, for a second. We heard Republicans denounce rhetoric from the left, particularly in the wake of the murder of Charlie Kirk here. Does saying the left is advancing an assassination culture help lower the temperature? Are you comfortable with that language and that framing?
It's not what I would have said. I'm always disappointed to see when my friends in the Democratic Party excuse people who call for murder, and I think that we are all horrified when somebody calls for the murder of any politician. I'm like, that's not. Let's wait. We don't want anybody murdered. Don't call for people to be murdered. Don't let the president of Colombia call for Trump to be murdered. Let's not have people call for Hakeem Jeffries to be murdered. This is the problem that we face, but it's of a piece with what we just talked about, which is that suddenly people feel like this sort of rhetoric, this hate-filled rhetoric, is excusable. When you call the president a dictator or a wannabe authoritarian, you're excusing people who think that something needs to be done that is extra legal. Similarly, on the other side, when you let people out who are involved in something illegal in Congress on January 6th, this is what you end up expecting.
Let me pick your brain quickly about another foreign policy headline. I know this is in your sweet spot of sorts. Vladimir Putin was supposed to meet with the president in the next couple of weeks. The president made the announcement. Progress. It's been productive. Now there's no meeting, it appears, at all. It's on hold. Is the president getting played here by Vladimir Putin?
Well, the president is always willing to talk to Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Putin is always willing to try to play the president. And it works for a moment. What I'm relieved about is, well, it works for Putin for the moment. What I've been happy to see is that every time that the president has given Vladimir Putin his umpteenth chance, and we can't deny that the president is always willing to give Vladimir Putin another chance, at the same time, he has turned around and asked Putin to do the most straightforward thing, a ceasefire in place. Zelensky said yes, I'll meet with him. Putin always says no. I'm hoping this really prompts the presidents to give the tomahawks that are necessary, the long-range weaponry that's necessary to the Ukrainians to finally stop Russia.
Megan Hayes, what should the president do?
I mean, we should be defending Ukraine, but we should have been doing that 9 months ago. The president has been 100% being played by Putin. I mean, what are we doing here? We brought him to this country, and we brought a war criminal to the United States and rolled out a red carpet as if he was the royal family. It's disgusting. I don't understand what's going on here.
Dan?
That seems clear.
I mean, it does seem like there is a dynamic here with the president about who he speaks to last. I mean, my paper, The Washington Post, had some really stellar reporting about the way that President Trump was headed into his conversation with President Putin and the way that he was talking and thinking afterwards and how dramatic that change.
He said if there's not a ceasefire deal, he'll be very disappointed. He left and said, I want a peace deal, which is what Putin was calling.
But it's very clear that he is desperate to get something done on this issue. After what's happened in Gaza and with Israel, I think that was a high for him. I mean, it was obviously a high that he got to travel to the region and was heralded and celebrated like presidents past have been celebrated when they've struck peace deals. It's very clear that he wants to get something done on this issue. I think what he's realizing and seeing is that it's a tough deal to make.
I would just suggest that in the Middle East, there's obviously major progress in that the hostages were returned. We can all agree that. I think we're a long way from a peace deal existing in that location. Prayers that happens one day. Dan, Megan, appreciate it. Danielle, always good to have you here. After the break, Capitol consequences, how one of the longest government shutdowns in U.S. history is disrupting access to critical food assistance programs. As demand rises, a leading advocate on hunger issues weighs in on the challenges still ahead. You're watching Meet the Press Now live. Welcome back. Demolition of portions of the White House is now underway in preparation for the construction of President Trump's new ballroom. These were the most recent images as bulldozers began tearing down parts of the East Wing. Earlier this summer, you might remember the president announced his plans to build this new $250 million ballroom to host large-scale events, pledged it would not interfere with the current building. That was his language. This project is the largest physical change to the White House in decades. Some of the most notable additions to the White House: the construction of the Truman balcony, of course, on the South Portico, the addition of the White House briefing room under President Nixon, right on top of where a swimming pool once sat. We should note that Comcast Corporation, the parent company of NBC, has been included on a list of top donors to the project. And joining me now is NBC News senior White House reporter Peter Nicholas, my friend. Peter, let's break this down for a sec. We were talking about this before we turned the cameras on here. There have been a lot of changes to the White House over the years, right? But this one appears to be a bit different in terms of its transparency, perhaps, and the magnitude of what they're doing. What makes this different in your reporting?
Well, I think it's different for a lot of reasons. They're tearing, it looks like that they are demolishing the East Wing, which was completed under Franklin D. Roosevelt. And there's just a lot of history that is going to be reduced to rubble, and that upsets a lot of people. The image of a wrecking ball going through the facade of a White House building on the complex is upsetting to many people. And this has been done with really a minimum of transparency, Peter. Normally, in a situation like this, you might see a review process. The public might have input. There might be some discussion about who the architect is, what the size of the addition, the new ballroom should be. That really hasn't happened here. What's happened here is President Trump has decided a ballroom is necessary, and he's gone about making that happen on his own terms and on his own timetable. Public is finding out about this at a time when it's basically a fait accompli.
Yeah, I think, as some have described, it almost feels like a metaphor for the Trump presidency, right? A wrecking ball to the White House and some of these traditional institutions of Washington and of the country in a lot of ways. As we look at this right now, the president can, ultimately it's the president's decision what he's going to do in a moment like this. His argument is, hey, you guys aren't even paying for this as taxpayers, but it is norm breaking like so many other things, right? Because there has not been some transparent process, planning commissions, and a communication and engagement of Congress in any form.
Well, that's exactly right. It is norm breaking. The president does have the authority to do this. And as you mentioned, other presidents have done similar things. Harry Truman built the balcony. That was controversial in his time. The entire interior of the White House was gutted under Truman because it was falling apart. So steel beams were installed. It was fortified. But that needed to happen. This is a little different. The president has decided a ballroom is necessary because he doesn't want to shuttle people, guests, out to the south lawn of the White House for state dinners. He wants it all self-contained on, in a building in this ballroom. One of the issues, though, is the ballroom may well be bigger than the White House proper. I think it's
the footprint's almost twice the size.
Yeah, I think you've noted this. This is going to be 90,000 square feet, whereas I believe the White House proper is 55,000. So it's one rule of thumb in architecture, I'm told, I was doing some interviews on this today, is that an addition should not surpass or should not outshine the original structure. And it sounds like that's what's happening here.
I think there's going to be a lot of conversations about this right now, to say nothing about the fact that we don't know who the list of donors, who these donors are, whether the president has anything to gain by doing this besides his desire to have what I think years from now will all be called the Trump ballroom, much like we have the Truman balcony right now. Yeah,
I think that's right. And this is a legacy that he wants. He's a former real estate developer. Yep. It's important to him. And he is going to leave his imprint on this White House, and the ballroom is going to be the biggest one.
He said it's music to my ears when he was in the Rose Garden patio, which he also renovated earlier today. Peter, thank you. Turning now to where we started this show, the ongoing shutdown and the pain that everyday Americans are feeling, including the possibility that funding for critical food assistance programs could run dry. Millions of Americans who rely on those programs like SNAP or food stamps or WIC, which provide food assistance to low-income families, pregnant women and infants, may need to look elsewhere for support. Food banks across the whole country are bracing for a major uptick in demand, both from people who rely on food assistance programs as well as from the thousands of federal workers who have been furloughed or are working without pay. And joining me now is Catherine D'Amato, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Food Bank. Catherine, I'm glad you're here. This is an important conversation because it affects a lot of people at their kitchen table. What are you seeing in terms of an increase in the number of people turning to food banks in your area, the Boston area?
Well, we're already seeing, because of the new federal budget and other executive orders, changes in these programs. And now with the shutdown, you're seeing federal workers be furloughed, perhaps losing their jobs. In Massachusetts, we have about 47,000 individuals who are out of work right now, and it's uncertain where they're going to get food, so they're going to turn to the pantry programs across the state.
Bristol County, I read, home to an estimated 5,000 federal workers, has a food insecurity rate of just shy of 50%. If this shutdown continues for several weeks, and at this point there's no indication that it wouldn't, and the money for SNAP and WIC, that women and infant program, dries up, what impact would that have on the food banks like yours? Are you able to meet the needs of people who may lose benefits in a scenario like that?
We're going to do our best to help them. There's so many people that are frustrated and fearful given this shutdown. And the Greater Boston Food Bank supplies over 600 programs across eastern Massachusetts with free food. So we will be here to raise funds, to purchase food, and to get it into communities across eastern Mass for those that need it. And we're not going to go away. We're a durable, sturdy agency, but this is a huge challenge. We will do the best we can. That's why this is a government, private, public partnership to feed Americans across the United States. So we need everybody.
Your job, of course, is not to advocate for a party's position on this right now, but you do speak on behalf of so many of those individuals who rely on your services to help live, to help provide food for themselves and for their families. So in the simplest of language, what is their message? What is your message to the lawmakers who are watching this conversation right now?
Well, hunger is not a partisan issue. Our lawmakers need to come to the table and ensure that there's food on the table for all of Americans that need our help. So get it done.
Speaking of getting it done, there's a lot of people that want to do what they can to help get it done for you in case you're put in this position to deal with so many. There are ways to help in your own communities, but you can certainly help in Boston as well. If people do want to contribute, are there ways that they can do that? What are the best, what's the best advice you offer?
Nationally, you can go to feedingamerica.org and see the food banks in your area. In Boston, you can go to gbfb.org and help. Don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be indifferent. There's lots of things that you can do. Volunteer, give money, call your legislator, let them know how you feel. This is an important time in America. We are upon a precipice that it can be very difficult for many citizens going forward. SNAP and WIC are programs that Americans depend on and have for years. They're vital nutrition programs. We need to keep them going for those who need them each and every day. Their mothers, their children, their veterans, their families. This is a big point of hurt and pain for Americans. And we don't need to be doing this. The shutdown doesn't need to happen. We need to get back to work and get our Congress moving and get our federal workers moving and feed America.
Catherine D'Amato, we appreciate your message and you making time to speak to us. We're wishing our best to all those families who need your services right now and hope those who are in a position to help are able to help you in that forum. We thank you. We are back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. There is more news ahead on NBC News Now with my friend, the Hallie Jackson.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.